Hello, I'm Evie. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, like my video. Are you ready to watch party ideas? Let's get started.
Close your eyes and imagine the era of neon, leg warmers, and cassette tapes. Yes, we're going back to the 80s, a time of vibrant colors, bold fashion choices, and music that was nothing short of iconic. Think Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Prince ruling the airwaves. Picture wild hairstyles, shoulder pads, and the ubiquitous presence of denim. This was the decade where pop culture truly came alive, from the unforgettable moments in movies like Back to the Future and The Breakfast Club to the emergence of MTV. It was a time when every moment seemed like a party waiting to happen. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to show you how to bring back the fun, the fashion, and the unforgettable vibe of the 80s for a party that will have your guests talking for years. Now get ready to step into our time machine as we guide you on how to throw a retro 80s party. First things first, you need to set the scene for your 80s party. The atmosphere you create will be the first thing your guests notice, and it's crucial in setting the tone for the rest of the evening. In the 80s, the world was a vibrant kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and styles. Everything was bold, bright, and beautiful. That's the feeling you want to recreate. So how do you go about it? Let's start with decorations. Neon lights were a staple in the 80s. Think bright, bold, and fluorescent. Neon signs, neon strips, neon anything really. They cast a playful glow that instantly takes you back to the era of disco and drama. And speaking of disco, a disco ball is a must. It's not just about the light it throws, but the feeling it evokes. The glimmering reflections dancing across the room will remind your guests of those classic 80s dance scenes we all know and love. But the 80s weren't just about neon and disco. The era was also defined by its icons. From pop stars to movie stars, the 80s were filled with larger-than-life personalities. So why not pay homage to these icons? Hang posters of Madonna, Michael Jackson, or perhaps the cast of The Breakfast Club. Their images will add that touch of authenticity to your party. Now let's talk color. The 80s aesthetic was a mix of bright and pastel colors. Bright pinks, electric blues, neon greens, and sunny yellows were everywhere. But pastel colors were also popular, especially in the latter part of the decade. So balance out the brightness with some soothing pastels. Try soft pinks, baby blues, or mint greens. Remember, the 80s were all about individuality and self-expression. So don't be afraid to mix and match, to go bold, to go wild. The only rule is that there are no rules. With the right setting, your guests will feel like they've stepped right into the 80s. Next up, encourage your guests to dress the part. The 80s was a decade that danced to its own beat, especially when it came to fashion. It was a time of bold styles, vibrant colors, and unforgettable trends. Let's start with leg warmers. Yes, those cozy knit tubes that grace the legs of many during this decade. Originally made popular by dancers for keeping their muscles warm, they became a fashion statement of their own. Whether worn over leggings or paired with a mini skirt, leg warmers were an 80s staple. Next, we have shoulder pads. These were the epitome of power dressing in the 80s. They were found in everything from blazers to blouses, adding an element of authority and confidence to any outfit. Encourage your guests to channel their inner boss and rock this trend. And who could forget about the neon? The 80s was a decade that wasn't afraid of color, with neon hues leading the charge. This was the time when people dressed in electric blues, hot pinks, and vivid greens without a second thought. But what if some of your guests don't have 80s attire? Well, why not provide some accessories at the party? You could have a selection of colorful bangles, oversized hoop earrings, and even some iconic 80s bandanas. This way, everyone can get into the 80s spirit, even if their wardrobe doesn't contain any retro pieces. And let's not forget about the hair. Big, voluminous hairstyles were all the rage. Whether it was crimped, permed, or teased to the heavens, the bigger the hair, the better. So encourage your guests to let their hair down, or up, as the case may be. Remember, the 80s was all about being bold and standing out, so don't shy away from the bright colors and big hair. Let your guests know that this is their chance to embrace the flamboyant fashion of the 80s and have a blast doing it. Now, what's an 80s party without some groovy tunes? That's right, it's time to discuss the iconic music that defined this vibrant decade. The 80s was an era of musical innovation and fusion. It was a time when pop, rock, and disco music seamlessly blended together, creating a sound that was uniquely 80s. The decade was also marked by the rise of some of the most influential artists of all time, names that are synonymous with 80s music. Let's start with the queen of pop herself, Madonna. With her catchy tunes and controversial image, she was a constant presence on the 80s music scene. Songs like a Virgin and Material Girl encapsulate the spirit of the decade and are guaranteed to get your guests moving. Then there's the king of pop, Michael Jackson. His album Thriller is still the best-selling album of all time, and songs like Billie Jean and Beat It are timeless classics that no 80s party can do without. His unique blend of pop, rock, and funk defined the sound of the 80s. And let's not forget Prince. His innovative music and flamboyant style made him one of the most distinctive artists of the decade. Hits like Purple Rain and When Doves Cry are sure to add a touch of drama to your playlist. Creating the perfect 80s playlist is a delicate balancing act. You'll want to include a mix of these iconic hits, along with some lesser-known gems to keep things interesting. Don't be afraid to throw in a bit of disco from the late 70s too, as this genre heavily influenced the music of the early 80s. Remember, the goal is to transport your guests back to this dynamic era, so don't hold back. Crank up the volume and let the music play. With the right soundtrack, your guests will be dancing like it's 1989. To keep the party lively, incorporate some 80s-themed games. Now, what's a party without some fun and games? And when we're talking about an 80s-themed party, the game should scream 80s just as much as your neon leg warmers and synth-pop music do. So let's dive right into the world of 80s entertainment. And let me tell you, it's a world full of color, music, and friendly competition. First on our list is a dance-off, but not just any dance-off. This is a dance-off featuring some of the most iconic 80s music videos. Imagine your guests busting out the moves to Michael Jackson's Thriller or Madonna's Like a Virgin. It's a great way to get everyone on the dance floor and laughing. And remember, the goal here is not to be the best dancer, but to have the most fun. Next up is an 80s trivia quiz. This can be a super engaging way to test your guests' knowledge about this rad decade. You can include questions about 80s pop culture, music, movies, and even world events. The person or team with the most correct answers gets a prize, maybe a mixtape or a classic 80s movie on VHS, for that extra touch of nostalgia. And last, but certainly not least, how about a Rubik's Cube competition? The Rubik's Cube, one of the most iconic toys of the 80s, can provide a fun and challenging game for your guests. You can see who can solve it the fastest, or if you have a larger group, you can even organize a tournament. It's a great way to stir up some friendly competition and keep the party lively. These games aren't just about having fun, though that's a big part of it. They're also about immersing your guests in the 80s theme and giving them a taste of what this colorful and vibrant decade was all about. These games will not only entertain your guests, but also further immerse them in the 80s theme. So there you have it, a step-by-step guide to throwing a retro 80s party. We've taken a trip down memory lane, immersing ourselves in the vivid and dynamic era of the 80s. From setting the scene with neon lights, bold colors, and iconic 80s memorabilia, to dressing up in the quintessential 80s style, complete with leg warmers, shoulder pads, and big hair. We've explored how to curate the perfect 80s playlist, filled with synth pop, rock, and new wave hits that will get everybody on the dance floor. And let's not forget the themed games that will take your guests back to the good old days of Pac-Man, Rubik's Cubes, and Trivial Pursuit. In essence, throwing a retro 80s party is about capturing the spirit of this unforgettable decade, creating an atmosphere of fun, freedom, and nostalgia. Now go forth and throw the most tubular 80s party ever. Remember, the key is to have fun and let loose like it's the 80s.